Why we have so many evidence on reincarnation and still the science as the mainstream doesn't take this as truth. So we're going through some of the examples, and at the end we're going to take some conclusions why this is happening, okay? So let's start going over, right? What is a reincarnation, right? Let's start from the beginning, from the basics. And if you go to the Spirit's book, is the return of a soul or spirit to physical life in another body that has been newly formed for it. This is the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec. So as you see in that cartoon, it's like a joke. Sometimes we don't go to a place that we want to be, right? I want to be to Paris, but Paris is full right now. He cannot reincarnate in Paris, right? But this is a joke, but it's more or less that what happened, right? We come back. With this, we die, and then we come back. And then we die again, and we come back. It's a repetition, right? So that's reincarnation. You guys can ask questions, okay? It's open to questions, so just ask questions whatever you want, okay? All right. I like to go over also other authors that are not spiritists, what they say about reincarnation. It's very interesting to see other people saying about reincarnation. Here at the books, Brian Weiss, he's a doctor, and he has many, many books. And one of them, Messages from the Masters, he says, to be in a physical state is abnormal. Because we have to remind ourselves that we are spirits. And temporarily, we have this physical body. But what we are, if I ask you who you are a spirit. But temporarily, we are here, right, with this vessel, physical vessel, right? And he goes more. We are in a spiritual state that is natural to you. When we are sent back, it is like being sent back to something we do not know. That means we reincarnate, right? It will take us longer. In the spiritual world, you have to wait, and then you are renewed. So we come back. The state of renewal, this is the state of renewal. It's a dimension like any other dimensions. So they put like it's very simple words. I like this very fresh perspective, and explain very naturally what a reincarnation is, right? What happened to us. I think it's very, very interesting. Now, before we go to the scientific evidence that we're here for, I'd like to start with this question. So, do you believe in reincarnation? What do you think? Do you believe, Mars?
I do.
You do? Everybody believe in reincarnation? Okay. So,
is that your final answer?
yeah, there is many ways you can answer. You can say, like, we're going to see there is another doctor, we're going to see her Dr. Wambach, Helen Wambach. She said, I don't believe in reincarnation. I know it. Because, it doesn't matter if you believe or not. A reincarnation is a fact, is a scientific fact, is a natural law. And you have many, many proofs of that. So even if reincarnation is not accepted by science as evidence, more and more scientists consider reincarnation as natural law. One of the examples, there are plenty of examples, and there is this book, it's in Portuguese, Reincarnation as Biological Law by Dr. Décio Iandoli Jr. He, as a doctor, as a scientist, he goes to this book since the beginning, explaining how these evidences is in fact scientific evidences, and why at the end of the book he has this brilliant essay explaining, when we go over here as well, explaining why then, if you know there's so many evidences on reincarnation, why science doesn't take it as truth, right? So, as you see, it doesn't matter if you believe or not. Reincarnation is part of everyone's life in this planet. Okay? So I went to internet, because every time we have some questions, what do we do nowadays? We ask to Dr. Google, right? He knows everything. We go there, so fun, okay, let's see what happened in reincarnation on the internet. I was astonished with the results. First, I Googled in Portuguese. In Portuguese, I found 20,600 results on word reincarnation. In English was 4,810,000 results. That's how our interest meter, right, about reincarnation is very high. Everybody wants to know about reincarnation. At least has the curiosity to know it. If it does accept or not, but at least go there. I want to know about it. Of course, within these links, there's something that against it. It's good to read it. Their reasons on that, right? Now Google has those tabs, right? You can check for images, and also you can check for books. And I thought, that's interesting. Let's see how many books we have on reincarnation. About 1 million books. And the first result that I found was the book of 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation by Dr. Ian Stevenson. That's the doctor going to be talking. He's a pioneer in research on reincarnation. We're going to be talking about him. So that's the first book on the result. I found this very, very interesting. So I decided to bring for you this information. Now, reincarnation in history. We go very briefly here. I'm not going to spend so much time talking about. What I want to show you, the reincarnation, that it goes back to 1300 before Christ. So reincarnation is there, this concept of reincarnation is there since ancient times. So it's nothing new. And it was there all the time. And you can go to Google and read more about it. It was always there. Okay? So that's very important to know. What happened today was Spiritism, with the publication of the Spirit's book. Allan Kardec, he did like brilliantly. He brought this, Allan Kardec himself, he had the opportunity to groundbreaking the understanding of reincarnation for us. Understanding why we don't reincarnate into animal bodies, body of animals. We don't. We always evolve, we will always progress. That's the idea of reincarnation. It's evolutionary, like evolution by Charles Darwin. That's how the only difference from evolution, because we have a spirit that oversees the process, right? So Kardec has this, the merit of bringing the Spirit's book, this interesting and explain reincarnation. In the Spirit's book, there are chapters dedicated solely to understand how reincarnation happens, how to explain it. So that's the merit of in Spiritism by Allan Kardec in bringing this information for us from the highest spirits. But the reincarnation is nothing new. Since the ancient times, we hear about reincarnation, right? Plurality of existence. If you go to another book of Spiritism at Genesis, the principle of reincarnation is the natural consequence of law of progress. Why? Because we came back here to become better. He asked this question: without reincarnation, how is it possible to explain the difference which exists between the present social state of the world and that barbarous times? If you go back on time and you check how humanity was morally, in terms of technology, and how we are now, we see a lot of difference. We are not perfect yet. We have a lot of problems. But if you compare these times, you can see the evolution there, that we are become better. Any questions so far? No? Are we good? Any comments? Okay. So we are here to go after the proofs of reincarnation. Where do we find these proofs? There are many ways that scientists has brought us those proofs, those evidence in reincarnation. Memories of past lives in children. There are many, many doctors, they have books published talking about how you prove reincarnation, because children, they manifest themselves, they can remember their past life more easily, because when they're very little, they still, their reincarnation, we say in spirit, is not completely. They still has this kind of contact with the spiritual world easily than us as adults. So that's, sometimes children, they can remember better their past life. Another way is past life regression. We have therapists to do that. We have psychologists that can do regression when it's necessary. And that's how some doctors came to a conclusion that is a reincarnation, because they were doing the therapy, and the person was going back on time until the womb of their moms, and then they start talking about something else. And then what are they talking about? They are talking about another times. The clothing was different. The food was another kind of food they have. And they start, what is this information coming from? And they end up to conclude that those information are all coming from past lives. Another thing that gives us evidences of reincarnation is the near-death experiences. We were talking right before, some authors, we have plenty of books on near-death experiences. People, they have, they suffer accident or they had surgery if some reason, they died, and they come back and they tell, hey, I saw something. And that is a proof of reincarnation as well. Another proof of reincarnation is through mediumship. Like the books that Spiritism we have from the spiritual authors, those are proof of reincarnation. They bring us information. They bring us important information how the spiritual world looks like, what happened when we die. They have a testimony from spirits. They come back to say, hey, I had a past lives. I have many, many past lives. That's one of them. So, and we have mediums like Chico Xavier or Divaldo Franco and many others that brought books that we have this information. So those are the proofs of reincarnation that we're going over. Scientific research. We're going to start with that's Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was the pioneer on the research on reincarnation. He already passed away in 2007, but there is a doctor called Jim Tucker. He continued his study. We're going to talk about him in a few minutes. Dr. Ian Stevenson, he was a Canadian-born U.S. psychiatrist. He worked for the University of Virginia School of Medicine for 50 years. as a chair of Department of Psychiatry from 57 to 67. Carson Professor of Psychiatry from 67 to 2001, and Research Professor of Psychiatry from 2002 until his death. What Dr. Stevenson did? He started with an essay. He wrote the evidence for survival from claimed memories of former incarnations in the 60s. He reviewed 44 published cases of people, mostly children, who claimed to remember past lives. This caught the attention of Eileen Garrett, the founder of Parapsychology Foundation, and she was the first one who found the research from him. So he got money from the foundation to travel to India and interview childs. And in a few months, he found 25 other cases. Just 4 weeks, just 4 weeks in India, he found 25 other cases. And was able to publish his first book. It was 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation. And if you remember, when I did the Google research on the books of reincarnation, that's the book, the first one in the list. That's the most searched book, because that's how Google ranked their search results by the searching times that you make it. So he has an important participation on bring us. He was the pioneer. He starts with him how those researches, how we can prove reincarnation. And it's interesting to know that why he didn't do here in the United States. Have you think about it? Because in India, they already have reincarnation in their culture. So if the child starts to talk, hey, to his mom, hey, I was your dad, I was your dad past life, they will accept it. But if the child here in the Western part of the world, you start to talk like that, you go, stop talking, what are you talking about? You take the child to a psychologist. So it was easier for him to go to India and find cases there. It was very easy because the culture is different. But here it's changing. Because you see the interest in, and have many American doctors researching on reincarnation. So we wrote this book, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation in 66, and include occurrences of dreams, deja vu, post-traumatic memories, and spontaneous experience, in general by children, before being literate, as they describe in a very simple way. Because children, when they're gonna say something, they say in very, very simple way. So they were not, they couldn't read or even write, and they were talking about their past lives. It was amazing. So he continues, and then this gentleman, Chester Carlson, he was the inventor of xerography. He founded the Stevenson, also the Stevenson research. And after his death, he donated $1 million to the University of Virginia to continue Stevenson's work. And I was thinking about Jim Tucker continue Stevenson's work. And I think it was what made this possible was this donation, right? And the importance they gave to the thing. Of course, create a lot of controversy in the university because the nature of the research. Imagine it. In 68, how they received that. I thought, what? You're going to donate what? $1 million to do what? Research on reincarnation, right? That's why he did it. He believed it in the Stevenson work. And it was very, very, I think it was very, very nice. Well, so because of that, what Dr. Stevens does, he left the department and devoted the research to the phenomenon of reincarnation, which he was a pioneer in research. he dedicated 40 years of his life to scientific studies with more than 3,000 cases. And he concentrates in birthmarks and birth defects and memories of past lives. He traveled from Africa to Alaska, 55,000 miles a year, collecting and 3,000 case studies based on interviews with children. It was a great research what he did. I think one of the biggest ones. Let's talk about the birth defects and birthmarks. Dr. Stevenson, he examined 200 cases of birth defects or birthmarks on children claiming past life memories. So these included children with malformed or missing fingers who said they recalled the lives of people who had lost fingers. For instance, a boy with a birthmarks resembling entrance and exit wounds who said he recalled the life of someone who had been shot. And a child with a scar around her skull, 3 centimeters wide, who said she recalled the life of a man who had a skull surgery. So there are plenty of cases about these children. In many of cases, Stevenson's view, the witness testimony or autopsy reports appear to support the existence of the injuries. So it's not like he take the testimony of a child and say, okay, oh, very nice you said that. So those marks are the wounds? No. He wanted to know the name, and he investigated if that was true. He went after the information because it was a scientific research that he needs proof, right? If the child is saying is really accurate or not. So he has this book, Reencarnation and Biology Intersect. And the book is about the birthmarks and the birth defects because he published that book, the 20 case, and then he put everything together in one book. So where Reencarnation Biology Intersect is written for general reader and is a condensation of a 2-part monography, Reincarnation Biology, a contribution to the etiology of birthmarks and birth defects. So he tried to explain in some cases what happened. So these birthmarks go stronger as a result of trauma or wounds of great intensity that are recorded in the etheric body. So what happened, the spirit has some kind of accident, and this stays on the spiritual body. So when they come back, it manifests again as a birthmark, as a birth defect. It was noted that many of marks, signs, spots, red skin sores were a remnant of past life. It's common that marks formed from gunshots, knives, spears, swords, strong blows, cuts in the skin, deep burns, among others. And I just noticed that I forgot to change the title from Portuguese to English. You do that all? I reviewed this PowerPoint so many times. It's amazing. Okay, but what is happening now? Dr. Stevens' work didn't stop because this guy, Jim Tucker, he continued his work. And I found very interesting, he puts this in numbers because he's investigating. He continued his work investigating children. Look at this, 60% of children who claim past life memories are male. Roughly 70% of children claim they died of violent or a natural death. In this case, just over 70% of the deceased individuals are male, the same ratio as in the general population. 90% of children say I can read.
They were the same sex.
They were the same sex in a previous life as they are now. 90%. So the chances that you come back at the same sex are great, right?
From the research, yeah.
Based on this.
Yeah.
And they say that yes. I think we have some information and I've seen in speeches that it was most likely you come back on the same sex as you were before. The relation time between, can you read it for me? The median time. So,
claim death and birth is 16 months.
oh, okay. So this interval, right, between that you stay in the spiritual body was 60 months. It's very little, right?
Yes.
But it's this is a median, right? You're not saying that you're going to stay 60 months only in the spiritual world. It's just based on this research, the median time was 60 months, but you can stay more or less. It depends the situation. So 20% of children claim, I cannot read it, memories
Of the time between death and
between death and rebirth. So 20% of children claim memories of the time between death. So 20% of children. That's a very high number, I think. Right?
Okay.
Let's say Jim Tucker, Dr. Jim Tucker, he's the one, he was interviewed by Oprah. Dr. Tucker releases a new book, Return to Life. It's a follow-up to his book, Life Before Life, explores American cases of young children who report memories of previous lives. Dr. Tucker worked with the renowned Dr. Ian Stevens, and I already told you this. And also, I don't know if you heard about Kardec Radio, and if you go to KardecRadio.com and you type the Jim Tucker name, they have an interview with him. And you can download like a podcast of the program. You can hear anytime you want. Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, who's the host, he's a neuroscientist, and she's interviewed, Jim Tucker. It is a very interesting to look at this interview. It's Kardec Radio. It's very easy to find it. So another way to prove reincarnation is past life regression. What is past life regression? It's provoked or a spontaneous process through which the individual is able to recall the past. Numerous cases have emerged of people who go to report previous experience during regression of memory. One of the pioneers on this is Alberto de Rochas. He died in 1914. He was a leading French parapsychologist. He was a historian, translator, writer, military engineer, and administrator. He was everything, right? But he was very interested in this phenomena. And he did this extensive parapsychological research and writing in which he attempted to explore the scientific basis for the occult phenomenon. He was interesting, but he went to the scientific side of it. And he has numerous books. He studied this for 30 years in subjects such as hypnotism, thank you, telekinesis, magnetic emanations, and reincarnation, and spirit photography. Look at how interesting spirit photography. It's not the topic today. It's very interesting to know. But reincarnation was on of the topic he was after. Still past life regression, we need to talk about this doctor, Dr. Helen Wambach. And it's interesting because initially she was motivated to debunk reincarnation. So what happened was she was doing this past regression with her patients, and she would make them go back to their, mom's womb, and then they start to talk about something else. They start to talk about stories. They were somebody else, and she was very intrigued, and she took note of everything. But she not only took notes, she went after the information. Okay, and she did specific questions. What time did you live there? What was the period of time? What did you do? What type of clothes you were wearing? What places you visited? Tell me the event was happening that day. And then she would go after the history of the place or whatever they tell her, and she would make, okay, it was really true. The person was telling something that it really makes sense for her. And she said, Wambach concluded, found people's recollections to be amazingly accurate, and wrote that fantasy and genetic memory could not account for the patterns that emerged in the results. With the exception of 11 subjects, all descriptions of clothing, footwear, utensils were consistent of historical records. So we have a contribution from Dr. Wambach. And I love this quote of her, I don't believe in reincarnation, I know it. That's very strong.
Yeah.
We also have a research in Brazil, not that extensively, but it's very important. We have a doctor, I don't know if you heard about Hernani Andrade. He was a Brazilian engineer, parapsychologist, researcher of reincarnation, existence of a spirit. If you go to YouTube, Dr. Andrade, he wants to prove the existence of a spirit, and he creates like machines. Because he was an engineer, he would design machines to find out, to prove the existence of spirits. So, and he was a professor of a master program at University of São Paulo. University of São Paulo, and a city with the same name, São Paulo in Brazil, is a very, very prestigious university. And he was the director of Psychobiophysics, Brazilian Institute of Research. He's the author of the book, A Case That Suggests Reincarnation. Reincarnation in Brazil. He studied 8 cases registered and 75 case studies. And he, sorry about the mistake there, the misspelling there. So the thing is, he didn't have anybody to help him with money. He did all by himself. All this was on him. Because we're talking about Brazil. Right? Here it's different. So in Brazil we have people, they go after research and everything, and they take in their own hands. They don't have any help financially to do that. That's Dr. Andrade, and he did a lot of things with a lot of years dedicated to these studies. He studies children between 2 and 4 years old on reincarnation memories, recorded with due precision, name, location, the same thing that Stevens did, he did it too. But less scaled down a lot, right? Because Stevens studied thousands of cases, but Dr. Andrade wasn't able to do that. However, this is just one of the researches he had topics with reincarnation. He had other topics also. He contributed with other topics on research. Okay, another thing that we need to talk about in near-death experience that brings evidences of reincarnation. You cannot talk about near-death experience without talking about Dr. Moody, Dr. Raymond Moody, the photo there, and other doctors like Ken Ring and Bruce Graysons. So they have patients who have undergone the experience of near death. The stories involving people and no data has contributed to the scientific studies on reincarnation. And I have a suggestion for you, if you can watch this movie, if you haven't yet. It's based on one of the Dr. Moody book, Life After Life. Have you seen this movie? And you can see it's based on his book, and it's very, very interesting to follow the stories of this lady. She just started having, you know, her memories. He's not a child, he's an adult woman, married, and she just starts to remember. It's a very touching story based on his book. So I leave you a suggestion for you to watch this movie. So another way that we can bring evidences on reincarnation is through mediumship. And in Brazil, we have Chico Xavier and Divaldo Franco, as I mentioned before. And we have many details about reincarnation and the spiritual life that is being passed by them. That's a very important, we have a movie on that, Astral City or Nosso Lar, a spiritual home. And this book brings so many informations about the spiritual life and also reincarnation. So mediumship is a way to bring us evidences on this topic. Now I'd like to show you a very short movie, and it's about James. This is a little boy. They start to remember his past life. So let's watch this movie a little bit.
And now, one of the biggest questions of life. What happens when it's over? Heaven? Hell? Nothing? Or might there be a fourth possibility, reincarnation? Could we come back as someone else? Here's Chris Cuomo with two down-to-earth parents who thought they understood the mysteries of life. That is, until their toddler began to talk.
On March 3rd, 1945, a 21-year-old Navy fighter pilot on a mission over the Pacific was shot down by Japanese artillery. His name might well have been forgotten, were it not for the remarkable, some might say unbelievable story of a little boy named James.
Okay, this is too tough. I need somebody to help me.
All right, I'm the volunteer. What do you want me to do?
Okay, just go climb this thing, and you have to hold me in case I fall.
Done.
James Leiniger is all boy, 6 years old, and full of spirit.
This is a special plane. It goes in reverse. You don't see a lot of that.
James knows a lot about planes, especially war planes.
What kind of airplane is that?
It's a Corsair.
His parents, Andrea and Bruce Leiniger, say from an early age James would play with nothing else.
He was obsessed with airplanes. If you look around the house, that's all you'll see. Airplanes, helicopters, aircraft carriers.
But then, when he was 2, the planes James loved suddenly began to give him frequent and frightening nightmares.
I'd wake him up and he'd be screaming, and he'd always be laying on his back, kicking his feet up at the ceiling. And I'd say, "Baby, what were you dreaming about?" And he'd say, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out."
They sound like typical kiddie nightmares, but Andrea says they went on the same way for months. Maybe too much TV. But James was just 2, and his parents say only watching Barney and Teletubbies.
Teletubbies!
And Andrea and Bruce say they weren't watching World War II documentaries or conversing about military history.
This is an F-18?
No, that one.
So what explains the nightmares and James's strange obsession with airplanes?
I talked to my mom about it a lot of times, and my mom had said maybe he's remembering a past life.
What did you say?
Politely, baloney.
Andrea and Bruce of Lafayette, Louisiana are a highly educated, modern couple. To them, the possibility that their little son James was manifesting signs of a former life was, well, a little out there.
You know, having a past life is not the initial conclusion that you come to. You try and figure out any other way he could have. Did he see anything? Has there been anything on television, anything that we've discussed?
But as time went by, Andrea didn't know what to believe. Here's James at age 3, going over a plane as if he's doing a pre-flight check. He would continue to say and do things that were puzzling, like the time his mom bought him a toy airplane.
And I said, oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom of it. He said, that's not a bomb, Mama, that's a drop tank.
A drop tank?
I'd never heard of a drop tank. I didn't know what a drop tank was.
Andrea's mother suggested she look into the work of counselor and therapist Carol Bowman. Bowman has written 2 books, both supporting the proposition that sometimes the dead can be reborn.
We are taught from a very early age in this culture, in the Judeo-Christian culture, that reincarnation doesn't exist. Once you observe this in a child, and the evidence is very compelling, you have to open up to another explanation for what is going on.
Bruce was deeply skeptical.
He said there has to be a logical explanation.
I don't believe in past lives. I don't believe in this stuff.
But with the violent nightmares recurring 3 and 4 times a week, the Leinigers felt they had to do something. So with guidance from Bowman, they cautiously began to encourage James to share his memories. They say the result was startling.
The nightmares immediately started reducing in frequency. He went down from 3 or 4 times a week to maybe 1 a week, 1 every other week. And at that point was when he started to articulate more about these past life memories.
Seems normal enough, a little boy improving when his troubles are directly addressed. But Bowman says this is more, that James was forthcoming because this is the age when former lives are most easily recalled.
They haven't had the cultural conditioning, the layering over of experience in this life, so that the memories can percolate up more easily. These memories tend to fade between the ages of 5 to 7.
His parents say between the ages of 2 and 4, James would reveal extraordinary details about the life of a former fighter pilot, mostly at bedtime, when he was drowsy.
Bruce said, what happened to your plane? He said, it crashed on fire. And Bruce said, why did your airplane crash? And he said, it got shot. And Bruce said, well, who shot your plane? And I'll never forget the look on his face. He went, the Japanese!
Still, despite these extraordinary stories, Bruce remained dubious, almost to prove they couldn't be true. He began to piece together the details James was sharing. And what he found, he says, shook him to the core. For in many instances, the stories appeared to match the facts. James seemed to be recalling real events, real people, in the life of a man who'd been dead for almost 60 years.
Bruce had always said, what kind of plane did you fly? And he said, a Corsair.
Yeah.
He said a Corsair?
He said the word Corsair.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did James remember flying a Corsair, he demonstrated knowledge of the plane's peculiarities, like the time he was flipping through a book about planes when he was 4.
And he got to the Corsair, and he said, that's a Corsair. And he goes, you know what? They used to get flat tires all the time.
In fact, historians and pilots agree that the plane's tires took a lot of punishment on landing. Of course, this is a fact that could easily be found in books or on TV. But then, James began to offer up the kinds of specific details his parents say are harder to explain away.
Another night, Bruce had come in and he said, do you remember where your plane took off? And he said it took off of a boat. Do you remember the name of your boat? Natoma. Do you remember what your name was? And he'd always say, James. His name is James. It never really occurred to us. We thought he just wasn't understanding the question. So I said, do you remember any friends or anyone else that you flew with? And he said, Jack Larson.
Bruce began doing some research. Almost immediately, he discovered that the Natoma was an actual ship, a small aircraft carrier in the Pacific called the Natoma Bay. And Jack Larson, the Navy buddy little James recalled? Well, it turns out there was a pilot named Jack Larson who served aboard the Natoma Bay. In fact, he's alive and well and living in Arkansas.
And it was like, holy mackerel. I mean, really, you could have poured my brains out of my ears. And I just couldn't believe it.
And there were more clues. Around this time, James began signing crayon drawings and other artwork, James 3.
One day I asked him why he's calling himself James 3. It was because I'm the third James. And every once in a while you ask him that today, and he'll still say the same thing.
And one day, while leafing through a new book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, Bruce turned to an aerial photo of the Pacific Island. James was seated nearby.
He pointed to it and he goes, "Daddy, that's where my airplane was shot down." And I said, "What?" "That's my airplane got shot down there, Daddy." And I just went blank. I couldn't say anything.
By then, Bruce had become a man possessed, searching the internet, combing through military records, and interviewing men who served aboard the Natoma Bay. Finally, a breakthrough. He learned that there was just one pilot from the squadron killed at Iwo Jima. That pilot, James M. Houston, Jr.